The notice lay flat on the chipped wooden table, its bold black letters screaming louder than any sound in the small apartment. She sat there in silence, her hands trembling, her eyes locked on the single word she feared most, foreclosure. The walls around her seemed thinner than ever, the kind that could hear your thoughts and echo your regrets back at you. She was 48, tired in her bones, worn by years of sacrifice. Her whole life had been about holding things together, her father's business, her broken marriage, and later, her son. She had built her days around responsibility, believing it would all pay off in the end. But now, the silence of the room reminded her that she had lost more than money. She had lost trust. Her mind drifted back to the days when she worked beside her father in the transport yard, smelling diesel and dust, watching trucks roll out at dawn. She had been proud of what they built together. She had believed the company was her safety net, her gift to the son she raised alone. But reality hit like cold water. The memory of Ethan's voice still stung her like a fresh wound. Figure out rent yourself, Mom. You chose your struggles. Those words had cut deeper than any blade. Her son, her only child, the boy she shielded from the worst parts of life, the boy she worked double shifts for, the boy she thought would stand by her, looked her in the eye and turned his back. She blinked hard, pressing her hand against the paper as if her touch could erase it. The rent was due. The threats were real. And the people she once called family had closed their doors. For a moment, she wanted to cry, to let the sorrow pour out until it drowned the walls of this cramped place. But something inside her refused. She had been broken before. During the nights she held Ethan close when her marriage collapsed. During the years she buried her dreams to keep the company alive. She had learned how to keep moving even when the ground disappeared beneath her feet. Yet tonight felt different. Tonight, she wasn't just a mother staring at unpaid bills. She was a woman facing the truth. The empire she helped build was gone, stolen not by strangers, but by her own blood. The room was still, but her chest burned. She whispered into the silence, as if speaking to herself was the only way to stay standing. How did we get here? Her voice cracked, but no answer came. Only the weight of betrayal, heavy as the paper beneath her hand. And so, she sat alone, a mother abandoned by the very child she gave her life for, staring at a future she no longer recognized. The words replayed again in her mind, cruel and unshakable. Figure out rent yourself. But she didn't know then that one day she would. She was not always like this, sitting alone in a small apartment with bills piling up. Once, her life carried a kind of pride, a sense of purpose she thought could never be taken from her. She grew up watching her father build something from nothing. He started with one rusty truck, working long nights and early mornings, carrying goods for people who barely trusted him at first. Slowly, job after job, he grew a name. Soon, his transport company had more trucks, more drivers, and people who knew the name of their business across the city. As a girl, she dreamed of other things. She loved books, wanted to study more, maybe even teach. But when her father's back grew tired and his hands shook from years of hard work, she knew she had to step in. Family first, he always said. So she tucked her dreams away and worked beside him. She learned how to balance accounts, speak to clients, even handle drivers who sometimes underestimated her because she was young and a woman. With time, she earned respect. She was not just helping her father anymore, she was building something too. Her personal life, however, was harder. She married young, hoping love would give her a family of her own. But the marriage was full of fights and disappointments. The man she trusted chose selfishness and betrayal, and soon she was left raising her only son, Ethan, by herself. Her father became her anchor then. Together, the three of them, grandfather, mother, and child, were like a small team. She told herself that no matter how hard it was, she would give Ethan everything she could. The years rolled by, and the company kept growing. There were long nights when she stayed in the office after everyone else left, checking invoices, making sure drivers were paid, making calls to secure the next deal. She barely slept sometimes, but she felt it was worth it. The company was their legacy. Her father saw her devotion, and one evening, he called her into his office. "You're not just helping me anymore," he said gently, handing her a set of papers. "You're my partner now." She cried that night, not out of sadness, but from relief. For the first time, she felt safe. This business was not just her father's, it was hers too. She thought of Ethan, just a teenager then, and felt proud knowing one day he would inherit something strong, something she had poured her soul into. But life has a cruel way of turning. Her father grew old, and his death hit her harder than she expected. Losing him was losing a guide, a friend, the only person who truly saw her sacrifices. She thought the company would be her comfort, the place where her father's spirit lived on. Instead, it became the source of her deepest pain. Now, in the present, her days are nothing like before. She wakes up in a room that feels too small, in a building where neighbors hardly know her name. Her body aches from the odd jobs she has started to pick up, cleaning offices, doing bookkeeping for small shops, anything that puts food on the table. She tells herself it is temporary, but deep down, she feels the weight of being pushed aside in her own life. She still keeps the values her father taught her: honesty, loyalty, hard work. But they feel like heavy chains now. People laugh at values when money and power speak louder. She has lost friends who once depended on her kindness. They avoid her calls, afraid to be caught between her and Ethan. She has lost respect in the eyes of those who once admired her. Most of all, she has lost the warmth of her son. Ethan, once the boy who clung to her hand and whispered, "Don't leave me, Mom," now looks at her with eyes as cold as winter. He believes he earned everything by himself, forgetting the years she stood between him and hunger, forgetting the nights she stayed awake just to keep their world intact. Each evening, when she closes her eyes, she remembers her father's voice: family first. She wonders what he would say now, if he saw how the very family they built the company for has broken apart. She still holds on to a thin hope, even as she feels crushed. Hope that maybe one day she will stand tall again, not because of the company, not because of what was taken, but because of what still lives inside her. She has been exhausted, yes, but not completely destroyed. The struggle is real, the losses are deep, but somewhere within her, the fire that once built an empire still waits to rise again. When her father died, the world already felt empty. The funeral had been quiet, with the smell of lilies filling the air and old men speaking about his hard work and honesty. She stood near the coffin with her son beside her, believing they would carry his name and his business forward together. Even in her grief, she thought, at least Ethan and I still have the company. It will keep us strong. But the days after the funeral brought a shock she never expected. She went to the office, planning to pick up where her father left off. She knew the company inside out, the books, the drivers, the clients. She thought everything would be as it always was, only with her now holding the reins. Instead, she was met with cold stares. Papers had been signed. Decisions had been made behind her back. She found her name missing from places where it had once belonged. It was Ethan who explained, his tone flat, as though he were reading a weather report. "The business is mine now, Mom. Legally. Granddad never put your name on the ownership papers. It was always under him. When he passed, everything came to me." She froze, staring at him as though she hadn't heard right. "What do you mean to you? I worked here my whole life. He told me I was his partner." "Partner in work," Ethan corrected, his voice sharp. "Not on paper. You know that counts for nothing. The documents are clear. I'm the sole owner." Her chest felt like it had caved in. She searched his face, hoping for a trace of kindness, of the boy she had raised. But all she saw was distance. She tried to reason with him. "Ethan, you can't just push me out. This company was built with my blood and sweat too. It's the reason you had food on the table growing up. You owe it to me, and to your grandfather's memory, to keep me here." But Ethan only shook his head. "No, Mom, you don't understand business. You're too soft. You make decisions with your heart, not your head. That's why Dad left, remember? You're not strong enough to run something this big. I'll handle it. You should figure out your own life now." The words hit her like stones. She could barely breathe. "So you're saying you won't even support me? After everything I've done for you?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, his expression calm, almost bored. "Why should I? You chose your struggles. You chose to work for free all these years. You chose to live the way you did. Don't put that on me." Her throat tightened. She remembered nights spent holding him while he cried over his father's absence. She remembered giving up jobs, relationships, even her own health just so Ethan could have stability. And now, here he was, looking at her as though she were nothing. It wasn't just the loss of the business that broke her. It was the loss of the bond she thought could never be broken. The boy she had raised to be her pride had turned into a man she didn't recognize. She walked out of the office that day feeling like a ghost. People who once greeted her with respect now avoided her eyes. She heard whispers, sensed pity, even saw a smirk on one driver's face, as if he already knew she had been cast aside. At home, she sat on her bed staring at the empty walls, the silence pressing down on her. She had nothing, not the company, not the income, not even the love of the son she had given everything for. Tears came, hot and bitter, but beneath them was a spark of anger. A part of her refused to believe this was the end. She had survived heartbreak before, survived poverty before, survived shame before. But this betrayal was different. It cut to the very bone. Still, in the middle of her grief, one thought grew stronger than the pain. If Ethan has chosen to leave me with nothing, then I will learn to survive with nothing. I will not beg him. I will not crawl. She didn't know how yet, but she knew this was the moment her fight for survival truly began. She tried to talk to him again, hoping maybe he would calm down. Maybe he would see reason if she reminded him of all she had done. One evening she called Ethan, her voice quiet but steady. "Ethan, we need to talk. I don't want to fight. I just want you to remember that this company wasn't built by one man. I was there every step. Your grandfather wanted us to work together. Don't push me out. But Ethan's laugh on the other end made her stomach twist. You always make it about yourself, Mom. You're not grateful for what I've done. Do you realize how much pressure I'm under now? Do you realize how lucky you were that I even let you work there all those years? Lucky. Her voice cracked. Ethan, I gave my life to this business. I gave my life to you. You're exaggerating again, he said coldly. You just don't get it. You think sacrifice makes you smart, but sacrifice makes you weak. And weakness has no place in business. The line went dead after that, and she sat with the phone in her hand, staring into the darkness of her room. His words replayed again and again. Weak. Ungrateful. Lucky. She wanted to scream, to remind him of the nights she stayed awake so he could sleep soundly. She wanted to remind him of how she shielded him when his father walked out, when people whispered behind their backs. She wanted to remind him that she never once put herself first. But he already knew all of that, and he didn't care. The past began to rise in her like old wounds reopening. She remembered the night of the divorce, holding Ethan's tiny hand while his father shouted in anger, packing his things and leaving. Ethan had cried until he couldn't breathe, and she had promised him, I'll never let you feel alone. She kept that promise, even when it meant saying no to a second chance at love, even when it meant working herself sick just to keep food on the table. Every choice she made was for him, and now he acted as though none of it mattered. It wasn't only Ethan who hurt her. Friends she had known for years stopped returning her calls. Cousins who once came to her for help now ignored her at family gatherings. The truth was simple. Ethan had money and power now, and people bowed to that. To them, she was only a sad woman who had failed to secure her place. Some even whispered that she was greedy, that she had tried to take what rightfully belonged to her son. The humiliation burned her from the inside. She walked into grocery stores and felt eyes on her. Imagined people talking about how Ethan had taken the reins, while she faded into nothing. She felt invisible, yet exposed at the same time. Life quickly became survival. She no longer had the comfort of her old salary, the steady flow from the company she once ran. Rent piled up, bills screamed louder each week. She swallowed her pride and started taking whatever jobs she could find. She cleaned offices late at night, her knees aching as she scrubbed floors that no one would notice. She typed invoices for small shops, her fingers stiff from long hours. She carried groceries for an elderly neighbor in exchange for a few dollars. Each task felt like a reminder of how far she had fallen. But through the shame, she kept going. She told herself, work is work. At least I'm not begging him. At least I'm not on my knees. Still, the nights were the hardest. She lay awake in her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking of how Ethan was probably dining in restaurants where the bill for one meal equaled her monthly rent. She imagined him smiling, laughing, raising glasses of wine while she sat in silence, too tired to even cook herself a proper dinner. And then the flaunting began. Ethan made sure the world saw his success. He bought a luxury car and parked it in front of the same office she once managed. He posted photos online, standing in designer clothes, holding glasses of champagne, surrounded by friends who praised him with words like brilliant and self-made. Each image cut her like a blade. This was her son, the boy who used to run barefoot in the transport yard, the boy who clung to her hand at night. Now he smiled into cameras as though he had built everything on his own. Not a single word of thanks. Not a single memory of where it all came from. People she once knew gathered around him like moths to light. They called him a leader, a businessman, a visionary. No one spoke her name. No one asked where she had gone. She was erased, as though she had never been there at all. The pain of it was sharp, but somewhere inside her, something stronger than pain began to grow. Every insult, every humiliation, every lonely night added weight to her heart, but also to her will. She had been stripped of everything, even her son's respect, but she was still alive. She was still breathing. And as much as it hurt to see him rise, it happened almost by accident. She had stopped expecting anything from the company, stopped trying to follow its affairs. But one night, while doing some paperwork for a small shop, she overheard two men talking outside the cafe where she worked part-time. They mentioned the transport company, her family's company, with worried tone. If he keeps moving money like this, the business will sink, one of them said. Her ears burned. She knew they were talking about Ethan. Curiosity turned to fear. She started quietly asking questions. An old driver, who still respected her, slipped her a few documents late one evening. I shouldn't be giving you this, he whispered, but you need to know what he's doing. She read the papers until her eyes blurred. Ethan had been taking money out of company accounts, moving it into private ones, spending on luxury cars, trips abroad, parties that glittered online. It wasn't just mismanagement. It was theft. He was stripping the company bare, risking everything her father built. Her heart pounded. For a moment she thought of staying silent, of letting him drown in his own mistakes. But then she remembered her father's face, the pride in his eyes when he called her his partner. She remembered the years of sweat, the workers who had families depending on that company. It was bigger than her pain now. She had to act. She arranged to meet Ethan in person. When he walked in, dressed sharp in his designer suit, the sight of him nearly broke her. He was so far from the boy she once carried on her hip. "Ethan," she began, holding up the documents with trembling hands. "What is this? Tell me it isn't true. Tell me you're not stealing from the company." He glanced at the papers, then smirked. "You've been digging through things that don't belong to you. That's pathetic." "Pathetic?" Her voice shook. "Do you know what you're doing? You're destroying everything. Your grandfather's name, the company that raised you, the workers who trusted us. Do you even care?" Ethan's smile vanished, replaced by a hard glare. "Don't lecture me. You never understood business. You still don't. Money moves. That's how things work. You think being soft and honest pays bills? No. Power does. Control does. Something you never had." She tried to steady herself. "This isn't power. This is greed. And it will ruin you." He stepped closer, his voice cutting like a knife. "You ruined me, Mom. You and your sad little sacrifices. You think I don't remember the nights you cried because Dad left? You think I don't remember you dragging me into that dusty office instead of giving me a real childhood? You made me grow up too fast. You made me hard. And if I'm selfish now, it's because of you." Her chest tightened, but she stood firm. "I gave you everything I had. I wish you hadn't," he spat. "I wish you had never been my mother." The words struck deeper than anything before. For a second, she couldn't breathe. Her son, her only child, had cut the last string between them. She felt herself breaking, but instead of collapsing, something inside her straightened. His cruelty gave her clarity. She saw that nothing she said would change him, but she could still protect what mattered. The next week, she gathered everything she had found, records, transfers, proof of stolen funds, and requested a meeting with the board of stakeholders. She walked into that room with shaking legs, but her voice carried the weight of truth. "I know many of you have forgotten me," she began. "You see me as the woman who disappeared when my father died. But I was here when this company was born. I carried it on my back. And I cannot stay silent now, not when it's being torn apart by someone who only cares about himself." She laid the evidence on the table. Numbers, accounts, signatures. Silence filled the room as the truth sank in. Some members exchanged uneasy looks. Others leaned forward, reading in disbelief. And then Ethan stormed in, furious. "Don't listen to her. She's bitter. She's jealous. She wants to steal what's mine." But the papers spoke louder than his anger. The board confronted him with the evidence, their voices sharp, their questions relentless. Ethan tried to fight, tried to twist words, but the more he spoke, the more he revealed. Finally, one of the senior members stood. "Enough. You've betrayed this company, Ethan. You're done. Effective immediately, you're stripped of your position." Ethan's face turned pale, then red. He looked at his mother, rage burning in his eyes. "You'll regret this," he hissed. But she didn't flinch. For the first time, she didn't shrink under his cruelty. She met his gaze with steady eyes. "No, Ethan, you'll regret what you became." The room fell silent. For years she had been silenced, pushed aside, humiliated. But in that moment she stood tall, not as a victim, not as a forgotten partner, but as a woman reclaiming her voice. The empire her father built might never be the same. Her relationship with her son might never heal. But she had chosen honesty, and she had chosen strength. And for the first time in a long time, she felt the weight of shame lift from her shoulders. The days after Ethan's downfall were heavy but strangely quiet. She didn't feel joy, not the kind people might expect after exposing him. What she felt was tiredness, a deep ache in her chest, mixed with a small seed of peace. For the first time in years, she was no longer carrying his shadow on her back. The company was no longer her burden either. It was as though a door had closed behind her, and another, uncertain but promising, was waiting ahead. Money was still a struggle. She had no savings, no inheritance, nothing to fall back on. Some nights she ate little more than bread and tea. But she had something new, freedom. She was no longer waiting for help from anyone, no longer hoping Ethan might suddenly turn soft and remember her sacrifices. She knew now she could only rely on herself. She took the skills she had learned over decades and began offering advice to small businesses in her neighborhood. A struggling bakery asked her to organize their accounts. A local delivery service needed her help with routes and costs. At first, the pay was almost nothing, but she didn't care. She had purpose again. People came to her not because she was the daughter of a respected man, not because she was connected to a company name, but because she was good at what she did. Slowly, word spread. "She knows how to run a business," people said. "She's strict but fair. She saved my shop from closing." Those words meant more to her than any title she once had. She printed simple business cards with her name and number, nothing fancy, just plain white with black letters. Each card felt like a piece of herself being rebuilt. Then one evening the phone rang. The voice on the other end froze her heart. "Mom," it was Ethan. She stayed silent, her breath caught in her throat. "I know you hate me," he said quickly, his tone broken, nothing like the proud, arrogant man who once told her to figure out rent on her own. "I lost everything. They've shut me out completely. I don't know who else to call." She closed her eyes. For years she had imagined this moment, him realizing what he had done. And now it was here, but it didn't feel the way she thought it would. There was no victory, no satisfaction. Only sadness. "I don't hate you," she finally said, her voice steady. "You're my son, but I can't save you anymore." "Please," he whispered, and for a second she heard the boy he once was. Tears filled her eyes, but she shook her head, even though he couldn't see. "You chose your path, Ethan, and now I must choose mine. I will not carry your mistakes. If you want to change, you'll have to do it yourself." There was silence on the line, and then the call ended. She sat there for a long time, staring at the phone, letting the tears fall. But beneath the sorrow was strength. She had finally drawn the line she should have drawn long ago. The next morning, she woke with a strange calmness. The sun streamed through the thin curtains of her apartment, and for once, the light didn't feel cruel. She had work to do, meetings with 2 small shops, notes to prepare. She brewed her tea, sat at her little table, and felt a quiet pride. Her life was not grand. She didn't have riches. She didn't have the company name. She didn't even have her sons love the way she once dreamed. But she had herself, her integrity, her independence. She had proven to herself that her worth was never tied to money, never tied to a business, never tied to anyone's approval, not even her son's. And that realization was more powerful than any empire. The evening was quiet. The small apartment was lit only by a warm lamp on the table. On that table sat a neat stack of business cards, each carrying her name. She picked one up and ran her fingers over the plain black letters. It was nothing fancy, but it was hers. Every job, every late night, every small step had brought her to this moment. She leaned back in her chair, the silence wrapping around her like a blanket. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel fear about tomorrow. She didn't feel the weight of waiting for someone else to rescue her. She had rescued herself. Her eyes watered, but this time the tears weren't from pain. They were from pride. She thought of Ethan, of the cruel words he once threw at her, words that used to burn like fire in her chest. She remembered how lost and broken she felt the night he told her to figure out rent on her own. Now, sitting in her modest home, she smiled through her tears. She looked down at the card in her hand, and with a soft, steady voice she whispered, "I figured out rent myself." The words hung in the air, no longer sharp, no longer heavy. They were light now, filled with strength. She placed the card back on the stack, folded her hands, and let out a long, peaceful breath. Outside, the city buzzed on as usual. Inside, she sat in quiet victory. Not the kind the world applauds with headlines or riches, but the kind that lives in the heart. She had lost much, but she had gained something greater, herself. And that was enough. Hey besties, thanks for staying till the end. Imagine building a life with love and sacrifice, only for your own son to betray you and leave you with nothing. But strength is born in pain. She rose, rebuilt, and proved she could stand on her own. If this touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories. See you in the next one.